Are the girls ready yet? I asked my ex-wife rudely, standing at her door, which used to be our door to pick up my 13 and 12-year-old daughters for a visitation weekend. Almost. How are you doing, Sam? My ex-wife Pauline asked, looking genuinely concerned. I only get 2 days off a month. Please make sure they're ready on time. I growled back, ignoring her question. I'm trying, Sam, but you know how it is with them. You can leave them a few extra minutes to make up for the time. So are you doing okay? I'll wait in the car, I barked, turning around and heading for my car. Sam, I heard myself say, walking away. I didn't turn around. We talked about it all the time, her trying to soothe her conscience and me ignoring her attempts. It took about 5 more minutes before Karen, age 13, and Wendy, age 12, popped out of the house with a small bag of stuff they brought with them when they came to visit me for the weekend. They jumped into my car with a chorus of "Sorry, Daddy," and the anger I was feeling faded away. As much as I hated to admit it, Pauline was right. Bringing girls that age anywhere on time was like herding cats, and I could never be angry with them. Since I only had them for a couple days, I tried to make those 2 days special by taking the Disneyland dad approach. I just didn't want my precious time to be eaten up by everyday life. After they habitually brought me up to speed and told me about everything they had accomplished over the past couple weeks, I prepared to give them the big news. They had insisted that I buy a new Nintendo gaming system, and I was finally in a financial position where I could do so. I couldn't wait to hear and feel what I would hear and feel, and I was looking forward to making the purchase with them. But when I broke the happy news to them, I was disappointed. "Oh, it's okay, Daddy," Karen said. "Daddy Dave already took us out to buy one toy and a bunch more games." I instantly went from disappointment to outrage. Daddy Dave. Damn Daddy Dave. Whereas before, I felt like I was on the edge of a precipice, now it felt like I'd added another couple inches. Perhaps I should explain. Dave was, I emphasize was, my best friend since high school. He was just a regular guy who had more luck in business than in love. He wasn't a gambler or a womanizer or whatever it's called these days. He just hadn't met the right woman. We met a few of the women he dated, and some of them were very nice, but even I could tell that none of them were right for him. Although he wasn't a blood relative, my kids started calling him Uncle Dave, and that suited us just fine. Pauline's best friend was Aunt Daphne. They were as close as only siblings can be, and we thought nothing of it. I trusted them all like family. I swear I didn't have the slightest idea that anything was wrong. Nothing had changed in our marriage. Our relationship was pleasant and easy, and we still spent a lot of time together. I found this out one evening when I got home on Friday. Pauline had informed me that the kids were staying with friends for the weekend, and I thought at first that she had arranged a romantic weekend getaway for us. No. I sat stunned as Pauline informed me that she and Dave had fallen in love and that I would be served with divorce papers tomorrow. She claimed that they had never had sex. Well, not full intercourse, which I didn't believe, but at the same time realized that it didn't matter now. That night she would spend that night at Dave's, and the next day she asked me to find another place to sleep. I told her to go to hell and not go anywhere. I was wrong. She didn't tell me there was a court order evicting me from the house. There were no allegations of abuse or anything like that. Her lawyer simply asked the judge to award her temporary custody of the kids and the house until the hearing, effectively kicking me out, and he issued an order to that effect. I didn't fight the divorce, but I tried very hard to annoy. Basically making outrageous demands such as the house, full custody of the kids, and child support of 75% of her salary. This dragged the case on for a while, but eventually I got tired of it. Threats of contempt of court for wasting time helped, and I just signed off. I didn't pay child support because our salaries were pretty close, but I had to pay child support and it hit my budget hard. I lived very modestly to afford to party every weekend when I had the girls, which is why I had to take the time to save up for a video game system. I guess looking at things objectively, I could admit that Pauline was trying to be as polite as possible given the circumstances, but I didn't respond well to that. Why shouldn't she be polite, I reasoned. She got everything she'd wanted, including a rich new husband, while I was struggling to make ends meet and getting 4 lousy days with the kids every month. It was simple economics. Pauline and I were getting along just fine on our paychecks. Subtract my paycheck, add to it Dave's much larger paycheck, plus the child support I was paying, and they were living well, and I was just trying to make ends meet. Pauline and Dave were married 2 months after the divorce. The hardest part was the kids, at least for me. I guess I expected more resistance or something. Maybe a little rebellion or, "You're not my dad, you can't tell me what to do." But the girls took it all for granted. Dave had been a part of their lives for years, so when he moved into the house and into Mom's bedroom, it hardly confused them. They were even excited that they would now have two homes they could go to as friends. Pauline and Dave's wedding anniversary was approaching, and since then, I hadn't said a polite word to them, or any word that didn't involve children. And now my kids were calling that traitorous asshole Daddy. Of course, I didn't let it affect me over the weekend, but by the time I dropped the girls off at the house, I was seething with anger. I kissed the girls and they ran into the house, no doubt to play the new video game that awaited them, when Pauline opened the door. "I need to talk to you," I said, and realized from her reaction that my tone was threatening. I turned and staggered away from the house and Pauline closed the door and followed me. "What's wrong, Sam? Why don't you explain that Dave's dad nonsense to me? They have the same dad, me. So what is this nonsense?" The girls wanted to call him something other than Uncle Dave since we were married. It was awkward for them to call him Uncle when we went out as a family. We thought about trying just Dave, but that seemed weird too, so we brainstormed and settled on Daddy Dave. And who suggested that? Well, probably me. But the girls thought it was great and agreed right away. I mentioned that you might have some problems, but they were sure you could handle it. "Please don't turn this into something more than it needs to be, Sam. It's not for you to judge how it should be, okay? You don't have to hear them call another woman mommy, especially from that asshole who came and stole your family. He's not." "What about the video games? You knew damn well I wanted to buy them for them, but Daddy freaking Dave went and bought them. What the hell? He, we just figured they'd waited long enough already and we weren't sure when you could do it. We just wanted the girls to have games." "Yeah, and show me in the process." "Sam, no." "Sure, let's show you how great Daddy Dave is and what a loser your real daddy is, huh? Sure, I left him and married a rich guy and now we have all this money while your loser daddy struggles to make ends meet every month. But we can scrape together some petty cash to buy you anything you want." "Nothing like that." "I guess that's exactly what it is." I turned around, went to my car, and without looking back, rushed away from the house. I was so angry, I was worried about what I might do. And a life sentence for destroying Daddy Damn Dave was not on my to-do list, and it went on like that for the next few years. If Pauline and Dave expected that there would be a thaw in our relationship, that my anger would soften, they were in for a disappointment. They repeatedly tried to talk to me, mostly about my life and how they would like me to overcome my anger. But I ignored anything that didn't involve my girls. I hadn't had any relationships with women since I got married, and there were various reasons for that. First of all, I had very little spare money. I had gotten a couple of promotions, but not enough to make a difference. Second, I was very distrustful of the female gender, so I focused on one-night affairs with women who I knew wouldn't be interested in anything long-term. Lastly, I was still very angry at what they had done to me, and even realized that I would make a lousy second person right now. Resentment, anger, and poverty do not make women resorts. Of course, I didn't even think about counseling. The last straw was the first weekend in June. School had just ended, and I was looking forward to summer weekends with my girls. Karen was already 15, very mature and responsible, and Wendy was 14. But I still enjoyed every minute with them. "Are the girls ready yet?" I asked, when Pauline opened the door, repeating the same exchange we'd had for years. "They're not here, Sam," Pauline replied, with a look of confusion on her face. "What do you mean they're not here?" I almost exploded. "They were invited to go to the beach with Finley for a week. They left this afternoon. They sent you an email a week ago." "Yes." And I sent them a reply saying I had the weekend off and would come get them. "Did you let them go?" "Of course, it wasn't my place to stop them." "No, why miss an opportunity to screw up your life even more?" "Now you just tell them I'll be here to talk to them when they get back," I said, and left again. That whole week went by like a blur. I was so angry, hurt, frustrated, and experiencing just about every negative emotion you can think of. I still only spent 4 days a month with them, although sometimes we would take one day for special occasions, and I didn't want to give it all up. If only I had known. I went back to the house the following Friday night, this time to talk to them about going out of town for the weekend against my wishes. I had only stopped by the house a few times since my divorce, always at the girl's request. That's what I did now, not wanting to have this conversation on the street. I stepped through the door into the living room. Pauline and Dave were standing in the kitchen watching me walk into the living room. I wondered later if they knew what was waiting for me. The girls were waiting for me, and I struggled to keep my composure as I sat down across from them. Yeah, Mom said you wanted to talk to us about going on a trip with Finley this week. We sent you a letter letting you know we were going to go, Karen began. Same, and I replied that it's my weekend and I expect you to be here and spend it with me. Dad, I meant to say we're going. I didn't ask permission. What? I practically screamed. You're not even 16 years old. What makes you think you can make decisions like that without your parents' permission? I got my parents' permission, Dad. Mom knows Finley and said we could go if I agreed to go with you. No. And you thought a letter telling me you were coming would be considered that I had it all worked out? Come on, Dad, I'm 15 years old now. We're not little kids anymore. We're growing up and we want to do things with our friends. I thought you'd understand that. I hardly ever see you anyway. Are you telling me you'd rather do those things than spend time with me? Dad, we're getting older and we want to be able to spend time with our friends. And I can't tell them to plan their lives around my father's custody schedule. Heck, we have something going on almost every weekend. Pool parties, trips to the beach, you name it. We almost never stay home on the weekends. And it became clear to me that my daughters were trying to tell me that they would rather spend time with their friends than with me, but were trying to do so without saying the actual words. It was like a knife in my soul, and I had to accept that this part of my life was over. I suddenly stopped being angry, and I was overcome with sadness at losing my girls. I didn't want the girls to know that they were killing me, so I tried to accept it. Okay, so what? You want to just give up the weekend visits? I thought I heard a small sigh from Paulina's side, but the girls didn't react in any way, so maybe it was my imagination. We're just really busy these days, Daddy. I'm sure you remember how it was. But that doesn't mean we don't love you. That's exactly how it was. 4 lousy days a month and they couldn't even manage that. The rest of the time they had Mom and Dad with them. Damn, Dave. There was no room for me anymore. I didn't expect my fatherhood to end when the girls became teenagers, but it did. Of course, girls, I've thought of everything. We'll get the visits over with and you guys have fun. Hey, man. They both jumped to their feet and enclosed me in a hug. Thank you, Daddy. I knew you'd understand. They ran to their rooms to do whatever. It didn't matter anymore, did it? In their innocence, they didn't even realize what they had just done to me. My place in their lives was gone. I stood up and headed for the front door. Pauline moved toward me. Are you okay, Sam? I tried to straighten up, pull myself together. I'm sure I failed, but I tried to make a brave face. Yeah, I'm fine. This will really free me up some opportunities I've been putting off. I have a buddy in North Carolina who's been trying to get me out there for a few years now. I headed for the exit, and it seemed to take Pauline a moment to realize my words. She quickly closed the door and tugged my shoulder to turn me toward her. Wait, Sam, you didn't tell me you were moving to North Carolina, did you? Yeah, of course I did. Why wouldn't I? I mean, you heard them. Thanks to you, they haven't needed or wanted me for years. And now they don't need me at all. This is just the end result of the events you set in motion, Pauline. There's nothing here for me anymore. No one who needs me. You abandoned me, and now they've abandoned me. You two are their parents now. I'm out of their lives. Congratulations. You win. I felt tears come to my eyes. I needed to get out of there. I couldn't think of anything more humiliating than to burst into tears right now, in front of the 2 people who had ruined my life. I quickly walked out the front door and headed to my car. I couldn't get the key into the socket until the last minute. No fancy remote locks for this guy. It must have been difficult because of the tears. Sam, wait, I heard Dave's voice behind me, and then his hand laid on my shoulder. I didn't say a word. I just turned around and punched him hard in the jaw. He fell, but didn't pass out. God, I had waited so long for this moment. Pauline rushed over to him to make sure he was okay while I went through my keys again. Sam, don't do that. They're just at that age. They still love you and still need you, even if they don't realize it now. If you leave, it will devastate them. What do you want me to do, Polly? Sit in my shitty 1-bedroom apartment, waiting and hoping my daughters will make time for me? Or more likely, be their backup plan if there's nothing to do over the weekend? It won't be like that, Sam. Of course it will. You heard the same conversation I did. All I was looking forward to was their visits, and now that's gone. You'll break their hearts. I doubt it, but even so, at least I won't be the only one anymore. Sam, you saw how excited they were that they wouldn't have to come to my place for the weekend anymore. Frankly, I doubt they'll even notice, at least for a while. Sam, please don't do this. I never wanted to do this. Maybe you wanted to, maybe you didn't. It doesn't make any difference. Maybe I'll see you again someday. Finally, I unlocked the car door and opened it. Dave finally got to his feet, and they both stood with a suitably mournful expression on their faces, though I doubted they meant it. I got in the car and stopped before closing the door. I looked at them one last time. Take care of my girls. They both nodded slightly and watched me pull away. I wondered if they would say anything to the girls. I hoped they wouldn't. I didn't want them spending time with me out of pity or obligation. Obviously, it was time to split up. The hardest thing about breaking up a family is the end of dreams. Pauline and I always talked about growing old together, children and grandchildren coming to visit, holidays, and anything else we could think of. The dissolution of my marriage ended many of those dreams, at least for me. But I still looked forward to graduation parties, weddings, and grandchildren, deciding that all of that was now in the past too. Maybe someday I'd be reunited with the girls, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the end. I called my buddy Tim, and he said he had a job for me. The money would be a little more, although I would still have to pay child support. Like I said, they didn't need it, but this was the last contact I would have with the girls, and I wanted to be able to say I had fulfilled my obligations. Just because I didn't want to feel the pain of living so close and yet so far away didn't mean I didn't love them or want to contribute to their lives. I wasn't being entirely truthful when I said that Tim had been trying to get me out to North Carolina for years. In fact, he simply said that he would always have a job for me if I needed one, and the time came for me to find one. There was a clause in the apartment lease that allowed me to terminate it with 30 days' notice if I changed jobs or residency, so I had Tim fax them the necessary letter. I had already paid the last month's rent and asked to leave a cleaning deposit. I packed everything I wanted into the car, which unfortunately I hadn't even put gas in, and hit the road. I tried very hard to drive, wanting to be there as soon as possible. Mostly because as I sat alone in the car, all my thoughts were occupied with the pain of my girls giving up on me. It was raining when I arrived in Durham, and it seemed like some kind of omen. Tim had a home services business and a place was already set up for me. I mostly did home repairs and handyman work, but I also did pest control. Tim suggested I get training so I could also do electrical and plumbing work, and I told him I would consider it. Tim never married. Instead, he had an endless string of girlfriends. I don't think any of them thought Tim was a long-term guy, but they enjoyed his money and partying lifestyle until something better came along. And that seemed to suit Tim just fine. I loved the job and was very busy during the day, but the nights were hard and I started drinking more than I ever had, and certainly more than I should have. Most mornings I would wake up somewhere in my apartment in the clothes I had put on the day before, and I would smell like a distillery. It was all I could do to forget myself. By the time I showered and put on clean clothes, I usually felt much better. So honestly, I didn't see any reason to change what I was doing in the short term. It helped with the pain and had no other consequences, although I suppose my liver was having a hard time. A few weeks after I arrived, Tim threw his annual 4th of July party. Tim had a nice house with a big backyard, which suited his party habit just fine. He bought a bunch of fireworks from a nearby stall, which we set off as darkness fell. During the day and evening, we drank, danced, swam, and even played a little volleyball. As was usually the case when I was alone with my thoughts, I became sad and wistful. It had been almost a month and I hadn't heard from them. As I soon found out, Tim's parties were once a month and usually coincided with a holiday. As everyone knows, there are no good holidays in August, but Tim didn't like that, so he came up with a party he called August Day. It was held on the second Saturday of the month and was nothing more than an excuse to party. My drinking didn't improve, or I guess you could say I became very good at it, and I ended up getting very angry again. Melanie, or whatever her name was, wasn't there this time, which disappointed me. Don't think I had any special feelings for her because I didn't. I was just hoping for a repeat of last month, and she was a known personality. Apparently, I'm a decent enough guy to find a partner for the night. I'm pretty sure I passed out after we were done, and like Melanie, she was gone when I came to in the morning. Tim fed me breakfast, and then I went home to wallow in my misery and loneliness. This continued for the next few months, but as I drank more and more, which I in no way expected, my ability to remember my partner's names diminished more and more. The woman from Labor Day was a blonde. I remember her being pretty boring. The woman was in costume for Halloween, so even if I wasn't drunk, I probably wouldn't have been able to tell you much. Also, it was a masquerade party, so even people in costumes that don't normally cover their face were wearing masks. She was wearing a Wonder Woman costume. I'm pretty sure she was a brunette. Tim, being a veteran, used Veterans Day as an excuse for a party in November. It was only a couple weeks after his Halloween celebration, but no one seemed to mind. Thanksgiving was approaching, my first day without the girls, and I was already quite tipsy. I finally heard from my girls. It was on Thanksgiving, but it wasn't what I was hoping for. I was hoping they would realize I had no plans for Thanksgiving, and then they would realize, or I would tell them, that I moved from a completely different state. You see, in the past, we've split Thanksgiving in half. One of us would spend it in the morning, early evening, and then move to late evening/evening, and so on every year. This year, I was supposed to be the last one. Karen didn't call a week before the holiday to confirm plans or, if Pauline had informed them of my move, to apologize for ignoring me for so long or anything else. But no, it was Karen who informed me that they had been invited to go shopping with Finley, and whether I would mind if we skipped our Thanksgiving visit this year. It had been 5 months and they still thought I lived across town and was just waiting for them to have free time. I didn't say anything about moving and just advised them to have a good time. Thanksgiving passed lonely. I sat in my hotel room and drank. Tim tried to talk me into coming to his place, but I couldn't be around a bunch of people and none of them were my family. I went to the hotel knowing, or at least expecting, that they would try to talk me into coming, so I did my best not to be discovered. When I woke up the next morning and turned on my phone, there were several messages, missed calls, and voicemails. Most of them were from Tim, who, as I expected, was trying to make one last attempt to persuade me to join him and his merry band at the party. There was a call from my daughter Karen's phone, and the attached voicemail message contained a cheery, "Happy Thanksgiving" from her and Wendy, and another thanking me for letting them go shopping. The last call was from Pauline, and she left a voicemail that I was more than sure I didn't want to hear. Of course, as a glutton should, I listened to it anyway. "Sam, it's Pauline. I know we haven't talked in a while, mostly because I assumed that's what you wanted. But I know the holidays can be hard on those away from family, so I wanted to check in on you. I know the girls called you. I'm sure you can tell they haven't realized you've moved yet. Please remember that they are still kids and are very busy doing important things for teenagers. They still love you very much. I know you don't really want to talk to me, but please let me know you are okay. An email or text is fine. Let me just say again that I'm really sorry about the way things turned out. I guess that's it. Please, Sam, please let me know you're okay." I made sure all messages and emails were deleted and then sent a quick message to Pauline to let her know I was alive, even though that wasn't the same as being okay. I really didn't want to do that, but it was easier than thinking about what might happen if I didn't respond. I didn't feel like doing anything else, so I opened another mug of beer. The pain wasn't going away completely, but I didn't mind waiting a little longer. For the next few weeks, I could barely stay on my feet. If I wasn't working, I was drinking or passing out from drinking. Somehow, I managed to stay sober long enough to work, but sometimes it was very difficult. As Christmas and New Year's Eve approached, which I was going to celebrate without my girls for the first time, depression began to overwhelm me. No one had ever felt as bad as I did or experienced what I had experienced, at least in my imagination. Sure, people had it much worse than I did, but that didn't stop me from feeling like I was worse off than everyone else. Finally, the call I had been waiting for and anticipating for the past month finally came. First, the girls whose call I hadn't answered called and asked about Christmas plans. Since our divorce, we've alternated between Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. This year, I was supposed to be on Christmas Eve, and they left me a message to confirm. I took a couple days to get heated, call them back, and have the confrontation that had been brewing for the past 6 months, but a call from Pauline interrupted my intentions. Sure enough, she had left a voicemail and was clearly annoyed. "Sam, it's Paulina. I hope you just didn't get the girl's message rather than choosing to ignore it. I finally told them you moved out. As I predicted, they took great offense. They always thought they could see you whenever they wanted, and finding out that was no longer the case was very hard on them. I hope you're proud of yourself for hurting your girls. I hate to say this, Sam, but I don't trust you with them right now. I know you would never hurt them physically, but you seem intent on doing it emotionally to punish them for what I did. I was going to suggest that they fly to you, but I don't like that idea anymore. Please, Sam, think about what you're doing to them. Don't ruin your relationship with them because you're mad at me. They're just teenagers and they think like teenagers. Please feel free to call me anytime if you want to talk about this or anything else. Merry Christmas, Sam. Damn, bitch. I didn't turn to anyone since I was alone. I had a couple more beers and called the bitch back. Sam, you're a goddamn bitch, I wheezed. By who? Who the hell do you think you are? You can't threaten me by not seeing my kids when I can't see them anymore. Sam, are you drunk? Let's see. Yeah, I almost shit myself. You shouldn't drink so much, Sam. It's bad for you. Bad for me? It's not good for me. What's it to you, huh? You've already taken away everything I've lived for. What the hell do you care what I do to myself? Do I care, Sam? Yeah, I realized how much you cared when you cheated on me and left me for Dave's damn dad. I realized how much you cared when you let the kids leave me. I didn't do anything like that. Bullshit, Pauline. Bullshit. Shit. You sent them away on my weekend so they knew they'd never see me again. You're a lying, manipulative, worthless, cheating whore who doesn't care about me. I heard her take a deep breath. Sam, I realize you're drunk and angry, so I'm not going to get into a conversation with you. Why don't we continue the conversation when you've had a little less to drink? Who are you to judge me, huh? Who the hell are you anyway? You're cheating on me. I'm hanging up, Sam. With my best friend kicking me out of the house and sucking me dry, and then you also judge me. You got a bloody nerve, Pauline. Pauline? There was no one there. She hung up. Goddamn bitch. I spent Christmas alone. I spent almost the entire day lying in bed. I tried to occupy my thoughts with the various sports on TV, but all the graphics on the screen reminded me that it was Christmas, which only made me more depressed and forced me to consume even more beer. I woke up during the Lakers game, either falling asleep or passing out. I smiled as I watched the Lakers lose to the Rockets by 20 points and then passed out again. In a service company like Tim's, you don't get a lot of free time. We can't just close for the holidays like some companies. Tim was contracted by a mortgage company to repair a house that had been destroyed by the owners after it was foreclosed on. There were several of us, including a plumber and electrician. I helped with the drywall work, and it was a fun couple days. These guys knew how to make jokes about anything. It was even nice because when I worked with the other guys over the past few months, they seemed kind of aloof and withdrawn, like they had a hard time accepting me. I thought maybe it was because Tim and I were friends before I even came to work here. But these guys were really nice, and I enjoyed their camaraderie. About mid-morning, I saw Tim's truck pull up to the house. He got out of the driver's seat, and another guy I recognized but couldn't name got out of the passenger seat. They walked in together, greeted the crew as they entered, and then headed toward me. Hey Sam, can I talk to you for a minute? Sure, Tim. I can always make time for the guy who signs my checks. This was meant to make the guys laugh, and it succeeded. Tim, however, smiled weakly. Let's step outside for a minute, Tim said, turned and headed for the exit with me obviously intending to follow. Once we were outside, the other guy stepped aside, obviously to give us some privacy. What's up, Sam? He asked. Fine, I guess, as well as can be expected. I replied, wondering where this was going. Okay. Have you been drinking anything? Only every night for the last 6 months, I laughed. Tim only smiled weakly and chuckled softly, but there was nothing funny about it. Yeah, I know. I mean today, he said, and his face suddenly became very serious. What? No, Tim, of course not. Good, I'm glad to hear that, but do me a favor. Blow into this. He pulled a small white device out of his pocket and held it out to me. I looked at it warily. What's this? It's a breathalyzer. I just need to make sure. I looked back. The other guy was looking at me, as were my co-workers when I looked back toward the house, though their faces suddenly disappeared from the windows. I guess I wasn't as one of the guys as I thought I was. Tim had no reason to be here unless someone ratted me out. Well, I may have had a beer this morning, I hesitantly replied, knowing he wouldn't be happy about even that. Oh, that's not so bad then, he replied, handing me the breathalyzer again. Realizing there was no way to avoid it, I reluctantly took the device and blew into it. I didn't know what the end result would be, but I knew it was no good. Tim took it from me and looked at the display. The small smile on his face immediately disappeared. You failed 004, Sam. That's more than a beer this morning. Yeah, okay, but I'm not even close to being legally drunk. That's for driving, Sam. But if something happens on a construction site and OSHA comes and checks you out, they'll find you're intoxicated and I'll get nailed, not to mention the potential liability if someone gets injured. Tim, I'm fine. You're not fine, he snorted. What you do at home in your personal life is your business. But when you bring it here and put me and my staff at risk, it becomes my business. I want your keys. One of the perks of working for Tim was the use of company cars. We took them home every night so we could go straight to the job site and have everything we needed with us. I handed over the keys. You're done for the day. Here's what's going to happen. Oscar will take you home and then come back here to take your place on the team. Tomorrow, instead of coming here, you'll come to my office and we'll talk about it. I just stood there, humiliated. But instead of remorse and regret, I started to get angry. I was perfectly fine. I didn't need to be sent home like a sick child. It was bullshit, and I didn't need it. You know what, Tim? I said, taking the helmet off his head and stuffing it into his torso. Screw you. I don't need this shit. Just keep it. I pulled away from him, walked over to my truck, climbed into the passenger seat, and waited for Oscar to drive me home. He silently got in the driver's seat and started the car. We drove to my apartment in silence, with only me mumbling some instructions to him. When we got to my apartment, I quickly thanked him and slammed the door shut. Damn it, I was so angry. I felt fine and had no problems whatsoever. One of those assholes must have called Tim and reported me. So the hell with them. I don't need other people judging me and my choices. I opened the fridge and saw a stash of beer. It was about time, I thought. I didn't have to go to work tomorrow. I woke up in a very bright room that I immediately recognized as a hospital room. I didn't know how I got there, but there I was. I felt bad enough to believe that a hospital wasn't the worst choice. Apparently, my waking up had caused some sort of change in my vitals because a nurse came into the room a couple minutes later. Good, you're awake. What happened? I asked. The doctor will be here to talk to you in a few minutes. She checked a few vitals as well as the flow in my IV, and then left, presumably to let the doctor know I was awake. I looked around the room. The walls were white, and a dry erase board said my nurse's name was Brenda, and the doctor's name was Anderson. I assumed he would be rich and handsome. Imagine my surprise when a few minutes later, a very attractive female doctor walked into my room and reviewed what I realized was my chart. She was clearly Hispanic and looked to be in her early 30s. Good afternoon, Mr. Beckman. It's good to see you awake. How are you feeling? I didn't answer right away. I was in a state of near total unconsciousness, trying to figure out how the beautiful woman in front of me and the last name Anderson were related. Mr. Beckman. I'm sorry, but because of my prejudices and the last name Anderson, I was expecting to see an old white guy, so I was a little taken aback to see a young, beautiful woman. Thank you. If it helps, my husband is a white guy, though he's not old yet, hence the name. How are you feeling? Very tired and kind of unimportant, I guess. What's wrong with me? Judging from your test results, I'd say you've consumed a very large amount of alcohol over a long period of time. You have alcohol poisoning as well as severe dehydration. If your friend hadn't called an ambulance, you probably wouldn't have survived. Friend? The doctor looked quickly through her papers. The ambulance was called by Tim Banks, of course. Mr. Banks asked me to let him know when you wake up, but he needs your permission to do so. Is that okay with you? I wanted to say no, but ended up nodding. Yeah, that's fine. Said that. We'll leave you here for observation for a couple days. As your body detoxifies, complications may arise that will require immediate intervention. Any questions, Mr. Beckman? I don't think so. After instructing me to get some rest, Dr. Anderson left the room and I was left alone. I turned on the television, mostly for background noise, and got comfortable to try to relax. I felt fine, so I doubted I would need a couple days, but who was I to argue with the handsome doctor? About an hour later, there was a knock on my door and it opened a few centimeters. I heard a man's voice. Are you dressed? Tim. Yes. He entered the room with his laconic gait. He stopped 5 feet from the bed. How are you doing? I'm getting on with my life. I haven't decided if that's good or bad yet, I replied with a half smile on my lips. I guess a thank you wouldn't hurt. It's not necessary, Sam. You can thank me by recovering and getting back to work. I didn't think I still had a job. What, you think you're the first employee to tell me to back off? Sam, we've been friends for a long time and I'm doing everything I can to help you get through this. I don't agree with all of your decisions and frankly, I don't think all this complaining is worth it. My advice is to get off your ass, get a grip, and rebuild your relationship with your kids. What Pauline did has destroyed your marriage and destroyed your family. Don't let her ruin your life. Mentally, I knew he was right. I hadn't hurt anyone but myself and probably the girls. If anything, I was giving Pauline exactly what she probably really wanted. It was time to pull myself together. Tim and I chatted for another hour or so before he left. As the evening wore on, I began to feel worse and worse. The doctor told me that it was my body adjusting to the lack of alcohol. I hadn't had a drink in about 24 hours, which hadn't happened in months, and my body rebelled. I realized how sad it was. I survived the night and checked out the next day. I was given several referrals to counselors, psychiatrists, rehab, and AA. I kept them handy, but really felt like I had already hit rock bottom and didn't need them. I felt like the kick in the ass Tim had given me and the wonderful hospital experience I had just had would be enough to get me on track. I stayed on the job for a couple more weeks. Tim was sympathetic to both the fact that I needed a vacation and what I had told him that day. I put enough money aside to make the financial blow manageable, and when I went back to work, I was happy to be back at work. The next couple months went smoothly. The Martin Luther King Jr. Day party at Tim's was fun, and I didn't take a single drink. Although I didn't consider myself an alcoholic, I had no desire to test that theory. I thought I would return to drinking beer again at some point, but for now I planned to stick to non-alcoholic beverages. The truth was that the monthly parties were starting to bore me. At first, I thought it was a great way to get my social life together, but drunken anonymous fun wasn't for me, so I gave up on the Valentine's Day party and went out for a big steak dinner. On the 1st of March, my life changed. It was Saturday, and I was running errands. I was on my way to the grocery store when I saw a wild mane of dark blonde curls suddenly fall heavily to the sidewalk. I looked back, and it appeared that she had tripped over the curb and fallen. She was holding her ankle and writhing in pain. The few people nearby were not paying attention to her. I quickly walked over to her. "Are you okay?" I asked. I know it was a stupid question, but I had no place to start. She looked up at me, tears already starting to form in her pale blue eyes. "I think I sprained my ankle. We need to get you to a trauma center. I can call an ambulance, but I'd be happy to drive you myself if you don't mind." "I don't want to impose." "Impose? That's a silly thing to do. You've just made today infinitely more interesting than it needed to be. My name is Sam, by the way." "Well, okay, if you really don't mind. It's nice to meet you, Sam. My name is Holly." I helped her to her feet, and as she straightened up, I remarked, "Are you pregnant?" "Oh yes, about 4 months along." "Then let's hurry up, just in case." I picked her up in my arms and carried her to my truck. I put her down briefly to open the door and then dragged her into the passenger seat. It didn't take long since she was very small, but a human body is still awkward to lift. We quickly made our way to the emergency room of the local hospital. I went inside and asked for a wheelchair to be brought in, then got Holly out of the truck and sat her in it. There was no one waiting there, and she went straight to her room. I didn't know I could join her, and she didn't invite me in, so I stayed in the emergency room. For 4 hours, I occupied myself with games and web surfing on my phone. I assumed that at some point she would call her husband, and then I would quietly leave. But everyone who showed up was either a patient or someone else, so I waited and waited. Eventually, the big doors opened and Holly came out in a wheelchair pushed by a nurse in a light blue jumpsuit. I assumed she was a UNC fan, but maybe it was just a coincidence. Holly was looking back at the nurse and saying something, and I heard the word cab somewhere, but the nurse, or orderly, or whoever, didn't pay much attention to it, probably because she knew I was there waiting. When Holly turned around and saw me, the smile on her face was as bright as a star falling from the sky, I swear. The nurse pushed her toward me, throwing her a "where to" look. I led her outside to my truck and loaded Holly inside. I thanked the nurse even though she had already turned and left. I climbed into the driver's side of the truck. "I didn't expect you to still be here. I had planned to wait for your husband to come get you, but no one came, so I stayed." Said, "No, I don't have a husband like that. It's just me and my mom here, and she's out of town on business." "Have you called her?" "She's just worried and wants to get home soon." "I'll be fine. Since you've been waiting so long, can I ask you to give me a ride to my car?" I looked at her bandaged right ankle and then back at her eyes. "Holly, I don't think you can drive with an ankle like that." "Oh, Sam, I hadn't even thought of that," she replied, also looking at her ankle. If you don't mind, let me take you to my house and then we'll figure out how to get your car." "That's very generous, Sam, but I've already taken up a lot of your time." "Yeah, but I enjoy it, and it's a lot more interesting than sitting at home watching TV. I'd be happy to keep helping out if that's okay with you." "Thanks, Sam." She gave me directions to her house that she shared with her mom. I pulled into the empty driveway and parked, then carried Holly from the truck into the house. I started to move toward the couch, but she stopped me. "Sam, I'm sorry, but I really need to use the bathroom. Do you mind?" I turned toward the hallway and followed her directions to get to the bathroom. I sat her down right in front of the toilet and stepped out, waiting nearby while she went about her business. While I was waiting, I ordered an Uber. She called out to me and I walked in, finding that she had time to get up and get dressed. I picked her up in my arms again and carried her over to the couch. "What now?" she asked. "Well, I have to go get your car. It's illegal to park there at night." "And how are you going to do that?" "I ordered an Uber and I'm on my way to pick it up now. Can I borrow your keys?" "Oh, Sam, you've gone too far for me, but I really appreciate it." She handed me the keys, giving me the license plate number and where it was parked, and I went outside to wait for my car. It should have only taken a few minutes. I stopped on the doorstep. "Holly, will you have dinner with me tonight?" "I'd love to, Sam," she replied, her smile brightening, "but I'm in no condition to go out." "Of course you are in condition. I thought I'd just grab something while I pick up your car and we'll do it here." I was just starting to walk out the door when I heard her quietly, "Sam." I turned to her, and her face took on a more serious expression. "Sam, you do remember that I'm pregnant, right?" "I know I'm a man, Holly, but I have some thoughts," I said with a smile. "I do remember. Why?" "It's just that a lot of men aren't interested in instant family. I just wanted to make sure you knew what you were getting into." "Holly, of course we've only just met, so we still have a lot to learn about each other. But I can assure you that your pregnancy is not a problem." "Okay, Sam, I just wanted to, well, make sure." "I understand. I'll be back as soon as I can." Grabbing my car keys, I walked to the curb and waited for my Uber, which pulled up about 10 minutes later. The ride was uneventful and I found her car with relative ease. I figured Italian food was pretty safe, so I found a local establishment near Holly's house and ordered food. It was about 7 o'clock in the evening when I finally returned to Holly's house with containers of Italian food in my hands. I found Holly sitting in the same place, but she had already changed into a dress. I said, "I wanted to look pretty for our first date." "Then you could have stayed as you were, but somehow you managed to look better." She smiled at me as I went to put the food on the table. When I came back to get her, she was already on her feet and slowly, albeit on crutches, made her way toward me. I moved to help her, but she stopped me. "I need to practice. Mom won't be home for a couple days." I pointed to a chair for her and she lowered herself into it. When she did, I could smell her perfume, clearly freshly applied. "You look and smell so good, Holly. I suddenly feel a little rough." "Oh, you look really good. To be honest, I don't like men who are too dressed up." We chatted about everything in the world. I told her about my job at Tim's company, Durham Commercial Services, and she told me about her part-time job at the local car dealership where she works in the title department. Her mom works as a legal secretary and is her main source of income. Her father left when Holly was 5 years old, and she hasn't seen or heard from him since. She was an only child. I told her about my marriage, or rather the end of it. She was shocked by what Pauline had done, but didn't seem very pleased with the way I dealt with the Karen and Wendy problem, though she didn't say anything. And to be honest, when I said it all out loud, I wasn't very pleased with myself either. I hated to say it, but Pauline was right. They were acting like teenagers, and I was supposed to act like an adult. I had to figure out how to make things right. I purposely avoided talking about how she ended up 4 months pregnant, without a husband or boyfriend. It was none of my business, and I didn't want to seem judgmental. At one point, her phone rang and I went out to leave her alone with her mother. It was a beautiful night. A light breeze was blowing and the clouds were blocking out most of the moonlight. I looked up at the sky, thinking about the beautiful blonde-haired girl in the house behind me. It had been a few years since my marriage had broken up, and I hadn't been in a long-term relationship since. But suddenly I thought it was time to consider the possibility. Do I really want to spend the rest of my life alone because my first choice turned out to be a cheater and a conniving bitch? Damn it, I need to deal with the emotions Pauline was instilling in me. After I finished talking on the phone, Holly poked her head out the door to let me know I could come back in and thanked me for my privacy. We spent the rest of the evening on the couch talking about everything in the world except the fact that she had a baby growing in her belly. She didn't propose. I didn't ask. Before I knew it, it was past midnight and the yawns we both let out signaled that it was time to call it a night. She got up and walked, on crutches, me to the door. We exchanged a brief kiss, nothing more than a smooch, and agreed that I would come over tomorrow to spend Sunday together. I drove home like I was on a cloud. I had gotten a very good night's sleep. The next day I arrived at her place around 9 a.m. with breakfast, which I picked up at a cute cafe near my house. The French toast, sausage, and hash browns cost me a tidy sum, but I didn't care. I knocked on the door and waited patiently. Holly was on crutches after all. When the door opened, she had clearly just gotten out of bed. "God, do you really get up this early every morning?" she said, squinting her eyes and smiling. "The perils of the job. Construction starts early. Heck, I get up and wait a decent hour." "Well, you did bring breakfast, so I guess you're forgiven." We exchanged another brief kiss, after which I busied myself with making breakfast while she waddled over to her chair. She raved about the quality of the breakfast, and I knew she would, since I'd eaten here before. I suggested we spend the day traveling through the countryside. I had been living in North Carolina for a few months by then, but hadn't traveled anywhere except for work and Tim's parties. So that's what we did. It was a beautiful day and we had a great time. We spent some time at the museum, which thankfully had courtesy motorized carts, so Holly didn't have to walk. We had lunch at a small local diner and spent a couple of hours just sitting in a park we happened to be passing by. It was very relaxing, and I noticed that Holly often goes out of her way to make contact with me. Just her palm on my hand or her shoulder leaning against me, but the contact was still there. When we got back to her house, she was very tired and her leg hurt a lot. I bathed her and covered the brace with plastic to keep it dry. I entertained her while she took her bath and then helped her into bed. We agreed that I would visit her after work the next evening. She usually worked on Mondays, but she was going to take a few days off to relax. I brought along some tacos from a local family taqueria, and we talked some more. While we talked, I gave her a foot massage and soon she dozed off. I tucked her into bed and got ready to leave on my own. As I was leaving, she sleepily thanked me for coming and reminded me that her mom was coming home tomorrow. Before I realized what that meant, she was already asleep. Walking out to the car, I figured she was letting me know that since her mom was coming home, she didn't need me. The next night I was sitting in my apartment preparing to watch a documentary about World War II and somehow forced myself to eat a frozen meal. What's with the Salisbury steak? When the phone rang. "Hello. Where are you?" Holly's angelic voice asked. "I'm home." "Why aren't you here? I thought you were coming." I thought you didn't want me there since your mom was coming home. You even reminded me of that before I left last night," I replied, a little embarrassed. "Ah, men. I told you that so you'd be ready to meet her. We've been waiting for you already." "Okay, I'm on my way." Holly met me at the door with a lingering kiss and put her arms around my neck. I could get used to this, I thought. I walked into the house and Holly's mom, Barbara, was already carrying food to the dining room table. If it weren't for the age difference, they might have been twins. Barbara had the same wild mane of blonde curls, although her hair was more well-groomed than Holly's. She was in great shape and probably weighed only a little more than Holly. I moved toward her expecting a handshake, but she pushed my hand away and hugged me tightly, giving me a motherly kiss on the cheek. "I'm so glad to meet you, Sam. Holly has told me so much about you." It's my pleasure, Miss Allison. Please call me Barbara. And for the record, Allison is Holly's last name, not mine. My last name, believe it or not, is Smith, thanks to my last husband. He was number 3 if you counted by the score, and I don't intend for there to be a number 4. I glanced at Holly, and she only rolled her eyes at her mother's revelation. I guess that was helpful. Since the food was ready, I quickly washed the dishes and we sat down to eat. Barbara had made stuffed pasta and garlic bread, with fresh garlic, diced as it should be, and it was delicious. I apologize for the confusion, Barbara. I realized that Holly meant that since you were coming home tonight, I wasn't expected. That's all right, Sam. Misunderstandings happen. I was just happy to meet Holly's new boyfriend. I glanced at Holly at the word boyfriend, and she smiled back at me. Like I said, she's told me quite a bit about you. I understand you're in the construction business. I work for a company called Durham Commercial Services. Part of it is construction work, drywall, and the like, but we also do pest control, electrical, and plumbing. I guess it's not so much construction as home maintenance. Do you enjoy it? I like working with my hands. My boss has hinted that I'll be given a chance to be a project manager in the near future. What do you do for a living? I'm a legal secretary. I work directly with senior partners, so I have a lot of late nights and I travel a lot. By the way, thank you for coming to take care of Holly when she was injured. It was my pleasure, Barbara. I haven't had anyone to take care of in a long time. I felt myself sinking into thought as the faces of my girls came to mind. I seemed to come to my senses pretty quickly, but Holly and Barbara had expressions that made them realize what had happened. We chatted nonstop over dinner, and then I got busy cleaning up. By the time I was done, it was late. Holly and Barbara seemed to say goodnight to each other, and then Barbara came over to me. I'm really tired, so I'm going to go to bed. Traveling is taking all my energy. It was nice to meet you. Now, she gave me another hug and a kiss on the cheek before heading down the hallway to her bedroom. The house itself was modest, with 2 bedrooms and 2 baths. Barbara occupied the master bedroom in the back of the house, and Holly occupied the other, using the second bathroom that was across the hall. Holly asked me to turn off the lights while she watched a movie on Netflix. They had one of those deep couches, so we had plenty of room to lie down together. I positioned myself behind her on her left side, and she positioned herself in front of me. It was some kind of romantic movie, but all I could focus on was the beautiful woman in front of me. After a couple minutes, we made love. The credits were rolling on the TV, and we lay there, happily pressed against each other. Minutes passed, we both drifted into sleep, and I slowly woke up about an hour later. You should probably get going. You have to work tomorrow. Holly broke the silence. I knew she was right, but I really didn't want to leave her, and I was ready to get up early so I could get home before work if I needed to. We walked to the front door. I'll see you tomorrow? She was still standing in the doorway when I looked back, and we waved to each other as I started the engine and pulled away. I hoped I hadn't been too optimistic. I felt like last night had been an exploratory night to get a feel for each other. I needed to leave to be ready for work the next day, but I didn't want it to happen again, so I brought a change of clothes for tomorrow just in case. I wasn't going to say anything to Holly unless it was necessary. Barbara met me at the door, and I joined Holly on the couch. When Barbara called us to dinner, I was surprised to see only 2 plates. Holly and I sat down at the table while Barbara excused herself. She showed up about 30 minutes later looking ready for a night out on the town. If Holly didn't say anything, I have a date tonight. I'll be back in the morning. And you kids have a nice evening. I'd been at the construction site for a little over 2 weeks after Holly's fall. We spent almost every night together, though some nights were spent only sleeping because I was starting to overwork myself, and that was dangerous. Events seemed to be repeating themselves as Tim and Oscar drove up to the worksite together. I quickly looked around to see if anyone looked guilty for snitching on Tim, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. I wasn't worried because I hadn't had a drink since I got out of the hospital, but it made me angry that someone was trying to snitch again. To my surprise, Tim headed toward the house where we were working, and Oscar was already waiting for him by the truck. He greeted all the workers and praised them for a job well done. Finally, he came over to me, and I thought, here we go. Got a minute, Sam? I nodded and walked over to where he was headed. I looked in his pocket for a breathalyzer but didn't find one. Trouble, boss? No, I was just visiting a couple sites today and thought I'd check it out. You didn't show up to the last couple of parties, which I totally understand, and I just wanted to see how you were doing. I'm doing great, Tim. I've started seeing someone. Gosh, that's great, Sam. I'm glad you're starting to build your life again. How's the progress with the kids? Actually, yeah, I need some free time when it's convenient. I'm going to fly down to see them. That's good, Sam. That's really good. Just let me know when and for how long, and I'll make sure you're provided for. Sam, I'll check the flights when I get home and let you know. I flew out the following Tuesday. I assumed the girls would be busy over the weekend and might not even be home. We always expected the girls to be home in the evenings, and I assumed the rules would be the same. Hoping that I would have the opportunity to keep the girls overnight, I splurged on a better hotel room with 2 double beds. I was willing to do anything to repair the relationship my resentment had ruined. As the plane whizzed through the clouds, I thought about Holly and our mutual goodbye. She was helping me look for flights and packing. She was getting around much better, but I still carried her up the stairs to my apartment on the second floor. And for the first time, we made love in my bed instead of hers. We got back to her apartment when it was time for me to go to the airport. She said goodbye to me at the door. I'm going to miss you, Sam. I love you. I suspected she was worried, looking into my eyes as she confessed her love to me for the first time. But she shouldn't have been worried. I put my finger under her chin and lifted her up to look into her eyes. I love you too, Holly. I'll be back as soon as I can. She smiled widely and hugged me again, and then I pulled away. The warm feelings didn't leave me all the way to Austin. My flight landed in the middle of the afternoon, so I grabbed a bite to eat and checked into my hotel. I bought a few things at the store that I thought I would need for my hotel stay and waited. The girls would come home from school around 4:30, and I assumed that would continue to be the case. Then there was usually homework until dinner was ready. I wondered if that was the case and decided to stick with that assumption until I found out otherwise. It was 5:15 when I pulled up to the house in my rental car. Pauline's Toyota and an unfamiliar old Nissan were parked in the driveway. Dave's car was nowhere to be seen, so I figured he was still at work. I expected someone to come out the door as I walked up the driveway, but no one was there. I assumed that meant no one had seen me, but agreed that it could be because no one was interested. We'd see soon enough. I knocked on the door and waited for an "coming" to sound behind the door. The door opened and Pauline appeared on the doorstep, and I had to admit that she looked as beautiful as ever. But I also realized that I had no feelings for her, something I couldn't say before. She looked at me in surprise, walked quickly through the doorway and hugged me. I'm not sure I would have hugged her back, but she pulled me to her, so it was a moot point. Sam, oh my God, it's you. You're back? Did you move back in? The girls are going to be thrilled. Finally, she unclasped her hands and pulled away. No, Pauline, I'm not back. I flew in to see the girls. She looked disappointed by my answer, and I had to assume it was for the girls' sake and not for her own. I wondered briefly if everything was okay in the new marriage, but it didn't bother me, and I soon put the thought out of my mind. Oh, okay. They're working on their homework. I'll get them. Pauline, wait. There's something I have to tell you first. She closed the door completely and turned to listen to what I had to say. She looked alarmed, probably assuming something hateful was about to come out of my mouth. Pauline, I just wanted to say that I'm sorry about the way I spoke to you on the phone that time. You know exactly what it was about, I'm sure. She nodded. I was hurt. I was angry. You were drunk. I was drunk, and that's not a good combination. I didn't want to admit it, but you were right. I could barely take care of myself at that point, let alone the girls. But no matter what, you didn't deserve to be treated like that, and I wanted to apologize. Thank you, Sam. I really appreciate it. It's been a difficult time for everyone. How long will you be in town? I'm flying in on Sunday. I was hoping the girls would stay with me for at least a couple days. Why don't you leave them for the whole time you're here? I'll pack them up for a few days. I'll be very grateful to you. Thank you, Pauline. Sam, could you come here tomorrow to talk after you take the girls to school? Just you and me. I had expected this. Pauline was always trying to get me to talk about it. I assumed she mostly wanted to deflect blame away from herself, but apparently it was time for a new conversation. Taking a deep breath in and out, I replied, Of course, Pauline. I can do that. She probably took my agreement as something more than it actually was, but seemed pleased and smiled. Good. Tomorrow then. I'll go get the girls and have them get ready. Not a minute later, the front door swung open and my girls came running out of there, showering me with the kind of cheers that would make any midfielder proud. I couldn't make out any full sentences, but there were plenty of "I'm sorry," "We're sorry," and "I love you." Finally, we were down on the lawn, me lying on my back and the girls stretched out on top of me. They seemed to have grown a lot in a very short time. They were still trying to talk at the same time, and I held up my hand to stop them. Girls, you don't need to apologize and you don't need to forgive. I was an adult. Well, I should have been an adult. And what happened was my fault. I'd already lost your mom, and I felt like I was losing you too, and I didn't handle it very well. Yes, Dad, but we could have been more careful, Wendy said. But then you'd give teenagers all over the world a bad reputation, I laughed, breaking the tension. Look, girls, we can blame each other, but I'd rather focus on moving forward. Your mom said I could keep you at my place until I get home on Sunday, so pack your bags. Oh, Dad, but this weekend? Don't think about this weekend, young lady, Pauline interrupted. Now go and pack. I watched the girls run off, making sure they were out of sight. This weekend? I asked Pauline. Oh, we were planning on taking them to the lake this weekend. Dave's parents have a house there. It's nothing that can't be postponed. This is more important. Thank you, Pauline. I didn't mean to disrupt your plans. And she nodded in response and then went to check on the girls. I walked over to my rental car, made sure it had room for their bags, and soon we were on our way. We pulled into the hotel and unpacked their bags. They both laid down on the bed they were to share and looked around. We went to Texas Roadhouse for dinner, and I groaned in disgust when Karen ordered a salad. Okay, it was a big salad, and it was very tasty, but damn, it's a steakhouse. However, Wendy did me the honor of ordering the steak as well as the baked potato. Sometimes you have to live a little. We spent the evening learning about their lives. Karen had found a boyfriend. His name was Rob, and he was in several of her classes. She showed me a picture, and he looked pretty cute, but I was once a teenager, so... Eventually, I had to make them do their homework. I just relaxed and sat online, glad that my anger and bitterness only cost me time with my daughters and not my daughters themselves. A couple times they caught me just looking at them. They would smile, I would smile, and then we would both go back to our business. It was all very sweet. The next morning I drove them to school and then made the dreaded trip to my old house to talk to Pauline. Honestly, I didn't see the point of it. We were divorced, had been for years. I was willing to talk about the kids since I now wanted to play as active a role in their lives as I could, despite the distance between us. But I doubted that was what Pauline meant. I had barely reached the front door when Pauline opened it in anticipation of my arrival. She put a glass of water in each of us, and we sat down at the kitchen table. I remembered all the conversations we'd had at that table, including the one where she said she was divorcing me. Thanks for coming over, Sam. I know you didn't mean to. Unless it's about the kids and getting me a date, I just don't see the point, Polly. Sam, it's been 4 years and we still haven't had a real conversation. I know you were hurt and the part of me that still loved you suffered for you. But it's been so long since then that I was hoping the anger would at least subside. But it doesn't seem to have subsided in the slightest. Why has it subsided? Has something changed? No, nothing has changed. You're still cheating on me. She tried to interrupt me, but I held up my hand. It doesn't matter if you had sex with him before you gave me your hand or not, you still cheated on our marriage. You spent time with him. You lied to me about where you were. You spent enough time to develop strong enough feelings, and you decided to leave me for him. You destroyed our family. He destroyed our family. You left me struggling financially and getting 4 days a month with the girls while you got most of their time and financial well-being. That's the way it was, Sam. I didn't marry David for the money. We love each other and are very happy. That's great for you, but it has nothing to do with me. What, am I supposed to be happy just because you're happy? Well, no. I just wanted to tell you that I didn't divorce you and marry David to hurt you and get more money. It just happened. Great. That's wonderful. I'm happy for you. I'm glad that ruining my life didn't cause you too much trouble. See, that's what I mean. You want to twist things around to make me seem evil, like I only did it to hurt you, when in fact it's not like that. See, whether that was your intention or not, you damn well had to know it was going to happen. What almost always happens in divorce. The mother gets the kids, and the father stays part-time. Can't be helped. I slammed my hand on the table. Hell yeah, it's possible. It wouldn't have happened if you'd stayed true to me. To fall in love with Dave, you had to open yourself up to the possibility. All those times you skipped out together or just spent time doing whatever were a direct assault on our marriage, and you did nothing. Nothing. You did nothing to stop them. I don't know what you're hoping for, Pauline, but if you think we're going to somehow become friends, you're in for a disappointment. I'll try to be polite to you when we have to be in the same place, but that's the best I can offer. Sam, you're right, and I'm sorry. I was wrong, and I'm sorry, but damn it, Sam, I'd really like to forget about it. I know I hurt you. I realize that. But isn't there a way, now that it's been a few years, isn't there a way for you to forgive me? Not to forget, but to forgive. I tried my best not to lash out at her, even though I thought she was being completely ridiculous. She just didn't understand. Pauline, because of you and that jerk, I lived like a starving college student for several years. I barely had enough to eat most of the time, and I lived in a shitty apartment in a shitty neighborhood. I'm sorry, Sam, but how could I have known that? You didn't know because you chose not to know. You knew how much money I make. You knew where I lived, and the rent was listed right on the website. You knew how much child support you were getting. It's simple arithmetic, Pauline, but you weren't interested in the conditions you left me in. You still had your own life and a new, richer husband, so who cared about me? The girls didn't say anything, so I thought, you buried your head in the sand. That's what you did. The girls didn't say anything because they didn't know. I made sure my pantry and refrigerator were full every weekend when they visited. The rest of the time I lived on ramen and macaroni and cheese. Good thing one box of macaroni and cheese is enough for 2 meals, if you're careful. On top of that, I've been trying to save money to be able to take them out when they want to do something, and saving even more to save up for that stupid video game. You knew about it, but you still went out and bought it like it was nothing. And to you, it probably was. You know what? Screw civilians. If we end up in the same place in the future, just stay away from me, all right? Just stay away. Sam, I don't... Is there anything else you want to say, Pauline? This may be your last chance. Sam, all I can say is that I'm sorry. I had no idea it was that bad, and you're right that it didn't occur to me to find out. I guess I thought you'd say something, since it's just the way it is. Yeah, having my wife leave me for my best friend wasn't humiliating enough. Let me go to them and tell them how hard I am financially. Pauline sighed heavily and seemed to be running through some thoughts in her head. I was tempted to just walk away, but I wanted to get this over with and intended to follow through. Sam, you're right. I just didn't see the situation from your point of view, and it was probably easier for me not to know the truth. I felt guilty enough as it was, and it probably allowed me to think you were doing just fine as it was. There's no point in letting the facts invade your own reality, is there? I guess it was naive to assume that we'd all somehow become friends again. I guess we are. But we have daughters to raise, and I'd like to work something out. Something like summer visits and vacations and things like that. Of course, Sam. I'll never keep them from you as long as you're in a good position. We can work something out. Even though the experience wasn't pleasant, I was glad that this conversation was in the past. I now knew for sure that all those times Pauline had asked me how I felt about picking up a girl, she was just trying to deflect blame away from herself. She didn't care about me, so much as she wanted to convince herself that her choice didn't hurt me much. I picked the girls up from school and we headed to a nearby miniature golf course. We kept score and had a great time. We went back to the hotel and I assigned them homework. I ordered pizza and we talked over dinner. This time it was my turn to answer questions. I told them about my life in North Carolina, kept silent about my excessive drinking, and apologized again for my behavior. They assured me that I was forgiven and were just happy that we were back together. They were especially happy to be able to spend time with me in North Carolina. I also told them about Holly. They were surprised that I was dating a pregnant woman, and I asked them to tell me more about it. Geez, Dad, Wendy said. You're almost done with us and now you can start over. That's 18 more years. You know you're almost 40, right? The smile on her face was precious. We'd always been able to banter with each other, and I was glad we hadn't lost that. I think I remember that, though with my advanced age I can't always remember such complicated things. I'm already planning to buy a modified wheelchair to keep up with the young guy. We all burst into laughter. It was so nice to be with them again. When dinner was over, they went back to their homework and I went back to surfing the internet. I didn't want to interrupt their TV watching, and it didn't look like there was anything worth watching. Except I called Holly when they were already asleep and brought her up to speed. We talked for about an hour, expressing how much we missed and loved each other. I explained that I was hoping for dates and she said she couldn't wait to see them. After hanging up, I headed to bed. The rest of the visit was similar. Dinner on Friday, bowling and mini golf on Saturday since we didn't have to worry about school. I had an early morning flight on Sunday and wanted to spend as much time with them as possible. And they certainly didn't mind. If they wanted to be with friends or at the lake, they kept their heads down. Sunday morning, I drove them to the house. At the girls' insistence, I went inside and said goodbye to Pauline. I tried to be a good role model, but it still took all my energy. I hadn't seen Dave the entire trip, and today was no different. I figured he was deliberately avoiding me. The plane ride home was bittersweet. I was sad to part with my girls, although I was glad everything was okay when I left, but I really missed Holly and looked forward to being with her again. At the airport, I caught a cab and went straight to her house. Barb opened the door and directed me to Holly's bedroom. "She's waiting for you if you know what I mean," she said, smiling and winking at me. By the time June came around, I had moved in with Holly and Barbara. I was staying there almost every night as it was, so when the lease was up, I didn't bother. This allowed me to save quite a bit on rent, although I insisted on contributing to the household expenses. Since the girls' schooling ended at the end of May, I sent them to visit for a couple weeks in mid-June. This allowed them to relax for a week after school and socialize with friends, but still stay with me in North Carolina for Father's Day. Holly bonded with them right away, and vice versa. While I was slaving away at work, Holly would take them to get manicures or to the movies or whatever. Karen and Wendy raved to me every night about how much fun they were having and asked when I planned to propose. I admitted to them that I already had the ring and was just looking for the right time. I think they liked being kept in the loop about it all. There were many tears as we saw them off on the return flight the last weekend of June. I had hoped they would visit us again before school started in August, but there were no guarantees, and the next time they could only come was Thanksgiving. I was hoping I could travel to Texas to see them, but because of work and Holly's soon-to-be birth, I wasn't sure if that would work out. I still wanted to celebrate the 4th of July, so we decided to go to Tim's party. I knocked on the door, and Tim greeted me and Holly by name, and I realized for the first time that Tim and Holly knew each other at all. I didn't talk much about work, so the topic just didn't come up. And then there were people coming in right behind us, so we didn't get to talk. Although he did congratulate Holly on the birth of the baby. We went inside, chatted a bit, and soon I was off to get plates of food for Holly and me. Holly had become simply voracious over the last month or so, and even as I loaded my plate, I knew I would get less than half of the food. Tim came up to me as I was adding pasta salad. "You didn't tell me you were dating Holly," he began. "I didn't know it mattered," I replied. "I didn't even realize you two knew each other until today." "It's a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. She came to a few parties last year. The last one, I think, was for Halloween. She was there in a costume." He suddenly stopped talking, and when I looked at him to see what was wrong, there was a detached, thoughtful expression on his face. I watched him for a while before interrupting his brooding. "What's going on, Tim?" He snapped out of his trance, but his expression remained the same. "How far along is she?" "About 8 months. Why?" "Just... Sam, do you remember the Halloween party?" "Some of it, I guess. I was still drinking then, so not much. Again, why?" "Well, I guess you don't remember. But you were sleeping with Holly that night. I saw you go into one of the spare bedrooms." "Sorry to correct you, buddy, but I do remember one thing about that night. My date had dark hair, and Holly's, as you can see, is very light." "I know, but Holly was dressed as Wonder Woman that night, complete with a dark wig. And of course, she was wearing a mask like everyone else." I paused and thought back to that night. I allowed that it could have been a wig. But even if it was true, and Holly and I had slept together anonymously months before we met, I didn't see the point in having this conversation. "Okay, let's say you're right. So what?" "Look, Sam, Holly broke up with her boyfriend a few months before, and they'd been together for years. More specifically, he left her for someone 10 years younger. Neither of you were making good decisions at the time. I don't know anything at all about Holly's sex life. about whether you were the only one she was sleeping with at the time, or even that night. Tim, what? Sam, the Halloween party was 8 months ago and she's 8 months pregnant. Sam, it could be your baby. Tim's last 5 words crashed into my brain with such force that I was confused. Was it really true? Holly and I hadn't talked much about our recent past. She knew about my marriage and how it had ended, and that for a while I'd found solace in alcohol. But we never talked about my one-night stand relationship or how she got pregnant. It was time to talk. I set my plate of food aside and went in search of Holly. She was in a small group of other women and smiled when she saw me. No, I've been waiting for you to eat, baby. I'm really hungry. Eating for two, remember? I know, it's just, we need to talk. I took her hand and led her to one of Tim's spare bedrooms. Holly saw the look on my face and immediately became concerned. Sam, what's wrong? She asked as I sat her down on the bed. Holly, I never asked how you got pregnant. I always thought it was your business, and if you wanted to share, I knew you would. But now I feel like I have to ask. I always thought it was my business. May I ask why you feel you need to know this? Do you trust me, Holly? Completely, Sam. With my life. I have a reason, I promise. And I'll tell you when we're done. But right now, can you just tell me what happened? She lowered her head thoughtfully, then looked up at me and said, Terry broke up with me a couple months before. We'd been together for years, and he kept saying he didn't need a marriage certificate to commit to life. He left me for some 20-year-old blonde with huge artificial breasts. It was a disaster for me. What did you do? I know a lot of women have promiscuous sex lives to prove how desirable they are. I withdrew into myself. I didn't go out, ignored people who tried to help me. I was very depressed and allowed myself to shut down. My mom let me do this for a while, but eventually started pushing me to do something about it. Eventually, I agreed to go with my friends to Tim's Halloween party. I'd met Tim before, but didn't really know him, although my friends had told him what had happened, so he was okay with me coming. He was always good with names. I've never been a big drinker, so even though I didn't drink much that night, I was pretty drunk. I saw this guy at a party. I was really horny, and we ended up in one of the bedrooms. He's the father of my baby. I'm sorry, Sam, I never wanted to tell you about this. It's okay, Holly, it's really okay. I know it's going to be very personal, but it all makes sense, you know? Okay. Are you sure he's the father? I mean, there was no one else there that night or around that time. She threw me an amused look, clearly increasingly interested in the reason for my question. And for a minute, I thought she was either going to get angry or just say it was none of my business, but then she answered, No, Sam, not with anyone else. I haven't had anything with anyone since Terry broke up with me. And I didn't until our wonderful first time together. What did this guy look like? I don't really know. He was taller than me and in good shape, but we were all in costumes and masks. What kind of costume did he have? Sam, what? Please, Holly, this is very important. It was a Scottish costume. He was wearing a loose white shirt and, hell, what do you call them? A skirt? A kilt. Yes, a kilt. He was wearing something that looked like a beret, and he even had this ridiculous set of kids' plastic bagpipes. While she talked, I searched for pictures on my phone. Finally, I found the right series of pictures and held them out to Holly so she could see them. Did he look like that? Her eyes widened at the sight of the image on the screen and she jumped to her feet. This is him. What the hell is going on here, Sam? Why do you have a picture of him on your phone? I kind of took it in stride, but you owe me an explanation of what's going on. Babe, I'm sorry I upset you. I just wanted to make sure before I said anything. What the hell are you sure of? Holly, the person in that picture is me. She couldn't have been more stunned if I'd walked up to her and punched her in the face as hard as I could. It's a good thing there was a chair behind her back because she just collapsed on it in shock. She finally managed to say. Tim took a picture of me when I came to the party last year. Holly, baby, I think that's my baby you're carrying. Holly just stared at me in bewilderment. I wondered what she was thinking. I just waited for her to make sense of it all. Heck, I was still digesting it myself. She slowly lowered her eyes and looked at her stomach, then back at me. It's me? Is this your baby? It looks like it. Oh my God, Sam. Wishes really do come true. What? I asked, a little stiff and uncomprehending. Ever since I met you, I've wished it was your baby, that it wasn't just some random stranger's baby. I know that didn't matter to you, and that's one of the reasons I love you so much. But I really wanted this to be our baby in every way, and now it is. Oh, Sam, I'm so happy. Epilogue. Holly and I were quickly married at the courthouse just a couple weeks before Ashley Barbara Beckman showed up. After Holly had recovered enough from giving birth, we threw a big party to celebrate the occasion. Barbara surprised us all by marrying one of the departed partners of the firm and retiring to spend her life traveling in an RV. She left Holly's house after confessing to me in complete secrecy that she was waiting for Holly to make some decisions about her life before moving on. It turned out that the number of men she had allegedly dated had dwindled to one. Since there was nothing else keeping us in North Carolina except my job, of course, Holly and I decided to move to Texas to be near my girls. Because of the experience I gained working for Tim, I was able to get a much better job with a much higher salary, which allowed Holly to become a full-time mom. Considering we soon had two more girls in our family, it was already more than a full-time job. During my entire time in North Carolina, which ended up being about 3 years, Tim never stayed with the same woman for any length of time or gave any indication that he was going to. We were back in Texas after another 2 years when a wedding invitation arrived in the mail. Neither of us recognized the bride's name. We flew to the wedding and met the bride. By the time I got back to Austin, Karen had gotten into UT, and Wendy was finishing her senior year of high school. She had been accepted to UT, as well as several other schools, but was still mulling over her choice. I convinced her to do what was right for her and was there for her whenever she returned. Pauline and Dave were having problems. For some reason, Dave had trust issues, because he was married to a woman who had previously cheated on her husband. I don't know if Pauline had done something to make him worried or if it just occurred to him. Apparently, it coincided with Karen leaving for college, so maybe it was just a result of him having more time to himself. I didn't care, but part of me saw it as a kind of karma. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so check out the next video and subscribe to my channel.